Welcome to the Geek on My Sleeve channel. Peter and I recently reread the Artemis Fowl Book 1 by Eoin Colfer in preparation for the upcoming live-action Artemis Fowl film. In this video, I'm going to be doing a spoiler-filled summary and recap of the book to help give you the highlights. We're going to do our best to catch everything that we feel is important and relevant. But if you feel like we missed any key details, please toss that in the comments below. So let's get into it. Artemis Fowl Book 1 is about Artemis Fowl II, who is essentially a part of like the Irish mafia who plans to restore his family's billions by kidnapping and holding a fairy for ransom. Throughout this book, we get to see his intelligence, his wit, as he goes head to head with the whole fairy population as they deal with the AKA mud people slash humans. In chapter 1, we get introduced to Artemis Fowl II. He is 12 years old at the time, and his faithful sidekick, manservant slash butler, who the Butlers are essentially a family that has been in service to the Fowls for as long as they can remember. At age 10, the Butler children are taken and trained to cook, fight, spy, do all sorts of incredible feats, and then are paired with a member of the Fowl family for life. In the first chapter, we get to see Artemis follow up on an online ad he placed in hopes of finding a fairy. He is then led to a fairy living in the human realm who is essentially a drunkard, where he then tricks into drinking holy water to get access to her fairy book, a book that all fairies supposedly carry that is written in Gnomish. He then proceeds to heal her, giving her two different serums, one full of spring water from the most magical place on earth, and the second is a virus that is supposed to flush out every drop of alcohol from her system. Moving on, after he gets a copy of her book, uploads it to Fowl Manor, he then goes back to his home where we get introduced to his mother, who has been in a deteriorating mental state ever since his father disappeared. Her memory has some gaps. She doesn't always recognize Artemis, which is a challenge for Artemis at times. And then he proceeds to try to translate this seemingly impossible to translate fairy book. He tries to use a number of different computer algorithms to decode it. Eventually, he uses the Egyptian language as kind of a basis for his translation and figures out the order in which the pages are read, and then recruits the butlers to kind of help him slice and dice some copies and feed it into the computer algorithm, which he's then able to interpret and read this what was once seemingly impossible fairy book. We then get introduced to one of our other main characters, Holly, who is a fairy, which is a general description for all of the magical creatures. She is technically an elf, but her job is a LEP recon officer. She is the first female officer in recon history, and she is very stressed out by her boss, Root. He then lets her know that The reason why he's constantly picking on her is because she is the first female officer. So he's pushing her to be her best. Right when it seems like she's about to get put on traffic, Root learns of a troll attack, and Root gives her one last shot. She is a bit anxious because her magic reserves are running low, but she refuses to let Root know that. We then get introduced to Foley, a centaur who wears a tinfoil hat to keep human intelligence agencies from reading his mind, but he is essentially the technological genius for the Leprechaun division. We get to see a little bit of the fairy world as she gets shot up to the mainland. All the fairies live underground. The mud people, aka humans, rule the surface. She gets sent up to the surface to try to combat the troll. We learn a little bit about some of the rules that restrict the fairy population. They need an invitation to enter a human space. As the troll is attacking this restaurant, Holly interprets the child's cry for help as an invitation, where she then goes in and combats the troll. She barely manages to disarm and knock it out, using up the very last dregs of her magic. When she comes back to, Root finds out that Holly hasn't replenished her magic through the ritual in 4 years and sends her to take care of that right away. Artemis then debriefs the two butlers who live with him in regards to the specific rules and rituals that govern the fairies. This is very important because Artemis uses these limitations to kind of take advantage of the fairies and use that against them. We get to see a little bit of Butler's tough demeanor crack as we find out he didn't debrief his little sister Juliet, because she is one of the few people who can laugh at him and get away with it. Artemis explains that the people, aka fairies, have to pick a seed from an ancient oak tree by a bend in a river, and he's narrowed it down to 129 locations that they will then be monitoring in the hopes of capturing a fairy as they go and try to complete the ritual. Butler and Artemis then do a stakeout for a number of months, where they then come across Holly, who is trying to complete the ritual, but Artemis and Butler are able to subdue and capture her. Root and Foley then learn that Holly has kind of gone off their radar, so to speak. They highlight 3 things as they replay her helmet cam: that Holly drew her weapon, Creepy Voice knows a lot about fairies, and that her fairy tricks of mesmer did not work. That was due to Artemis and Butler wearing special glasses to kind of counteract her eye-to-eye magic. Another thing that Artemis learned from the book. Root puts himself back into commission to do a recon and retrieval of Holly. Foley gives him a hard time, pointing out Root's age and being out of shape, but Root doesn't care and goes back into the field to try to save Holly. Artemis, showing his wit, manages to set up a trap for Root, where he puts a bomb near the tracker that he found on Holly. Root barely makes it out alive and instructs Foley to start finding all the information they can about the Fowls. At this point in the story, Artemis goes down to have a chat with his prisoner Holly. Juliet then interrupts him, saying that Artemis Sr. is back. We see a little bit of Artemis' humanity and guilt for have kind of given up on his father, who we don't really get to see at all in book one, just hinted at, but it turns out that it is just his mother's mental state further deteriorating, and she has pretty much made this doll of Artemis Sr. Sad story. Mother's memory continues to deteriorate. Artemis does what he can to comfort her and moves on and gets back to dealing with the upcoming fairy confrontation. We get to see a little bit of Artemis Fowl's tech. He's bought a new camera that Butler is using to keep an eye on the grounds. Artemis has a hunch that the fairies are on the way, and he has adjusted Holly's helmet so that Butler is able to use it to see the fairies. And we get to see Butler take out pretty much an entire squad single-handedly of the fairies recon unit. And we move on to the next step that the fairies follow, where they use a time stop to essentially freeze Fowl Manor. After the recon unit gets knocked out, Root goes into the house to negotiate with Artemis Fowl. Root doesn't really keep his temper under control. We get to see a little bit more of his wit, and yeah, Artemis pretty much demands for Holly a 24-carat ton of gold in unmarked ingots. At this point, we get introduced to Mulch, a dwarf who has been in and out of prison for a couple hundred years. There's some confrontation with the goblins in prison. Mulch barely escapes by being summoned by Root to break into the manor. And one of the major reasons why Mulch is selected for this is because he's already lost his magic, so he can break in where the other fairies cannot because they don't want to lose their magic. Mulch, after breaking in with a bit of Foley's help, manages to take down Butler on his own with a bit of gas from his bum, and then Mulch escapes and fakes his death. Another major character kind of takes over the recon operation, Cudgeon, where he then decides to use the troll that we got introduced earlier to break into Fowl Manor before using a bio bomb that would essentially wipe out everyone in the house. Holly manages to complete the ritual, trick Juliet into watching some WrestleMania, and escapes from her prison, but not the house. The troll ends up attacking the manor. Butler gets knocked out. Holly tries to take down the troll. Holly gets knocked out. She manages to heal Butler, where he then puts on a medieval set of armor and takes it down with a mace. Before Butler goes to check up on Artemis, he rushes off to check up on Juliet. And yeah, crisis averted. Artemis has won. He ends up getting the gold after delivering one final ultimatum to Root. They send in the gold. Artemis negotiates with Holly for a wish. Holly then returns with half of the gold. The fairies think that they have finally won, get ready to set off a bio bomb, but Artemis, who has been claiming all this time that he knows how to escape the time stop field, manages to do so by slipping the butlers and himself some tranquilizers. Butler tastes the sedative, but decides to trust in Artemis, allowing himself to pass out and not hurting Artemis. That's pretty much the gist of book one. Artemis wins. He gets half a ton of gold to kind of replenish his family fortune. The fairies considered the conflict for the most part over, him having played by their rules and managing to steal the gold. Bit of foreshadowing of more conflicts to come. And yeah, his mother's mental state has been restored thanks to his wish with Holly. Let us know down in the comments below if you feel like we missed anything. Looking forward to the upcoming Geek Out session for this. If you missed it, you can always check out our Geek Out sessions in the archive. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.